The year was 1958, and the discovery of oil in the Niger Delta would change the course of history, for better or worse. Beneath the fertile soils of Ogoniland lay the black gold that nations coveted. But for the Ogoni people, this discovery was not a blessing, it was a curse. Nestled in southeastern Nigeria, Ogoniland was home to vibrant traditions and lush landscapes. The Ogoni people, numbering about 500,000, thrived on their lands, farming and fishing to sustain their lives. Yet, as the oil rigs moved in, the earth groaned with despair. Rivers turned black, farmlands withered, and the air became thick with poison. Ken Saro-Wiwa, known simply as Ken Saro-Wiwa, was born in this very land on October 10, 1941. Little did the world know that this bright, ambitious child from Bori village would grow into a voice that thundered across nations. His battle cry? Justice for the Ogoni people. Ogoniland wasn't just a region, it was a cradle of life and culture. The Ogoni people, deeply connected to their land, had lived harmoniously with nature for centuries. Rivers teemed with fish, forests provided sustenance, and the fertile soil grew yams, cassava, and plantains in abundance. But with the arrival of oil companies in 1958, this paradise began to wither. By the 1970s, Shell's operations had turned once pristine rivers into toxic streams and farmland into barren wastelands. The Ogoni watched helplessly as their means of livelihood slipped through their fingers, replaced by pipelines and flaring gas stacks. It was this environmental devastation that planted the seeds of resistance in the hearts of the Ogoni people, particularly in the young and observant Ken Saro-Wiwa. Saro-Wiwa's early years were marked by brilliance. At Government College Umuahia, he excelled, winning accolades in history and English. He later earned a scholarship to the University of Ibadan, where he studied English and immersed himself in drama and literature. At university, Saro-Wiwa began honing the skills that would later define his activism. He wrote, acted, and directed plays that captured the complexities of Nigerian society. Yet, even in these formative years, he couldn't ignore the growing tension in his homeland. This academic foundation would become his weapon, his words sharper than any sword. But even as he thrived, the first cracks in Nigeria's unity were beginning to show. The oil-rich Niger Delta became a battleground of interests, with corporations and the government prioritizing profits over people. The Biafran Civil War erupted in 1967, threatening to tear Nigeria apart. Saro-Wiwa, though Ogoni, aligned with the federal government, serving as the civilian administrator of Bonny Island, a critical oil hub. Here he witnessed firsthand the machinery of power and greed. "I saw rivers of oil," he later wrote, "but also rivers of blood." As a civilian administrator, Saro-Wiwa worked to balance the needs of the local communities with the demands of the federal government. But the experience left a bitter taste. He saw how the region's resources were being siphoned off to fuel the war, leaving the local people impoverished. This experience transformed him. He began to see the Niger Delta not as a mere pawn in Nigeria's chess game, but as a kingdom under siege, a kingdom he would one day defend. After the war, Saro-Wiwa returned to Ogoniland, disillusioned with the government but determined to make a difference. In the decades that followed, his career soared. He became a successful businessman, a celebrated author, and the creator of the wildly popular TV series Bassi and Company. But even as he garnered fame, his heart remained with his people. The Ogoni lands were being ravaged, their voices drowned out by the clinking of corporate coffers. Saro-Wiwa's writings increasingly reflected his anger and frustration. Through satirical novels like Sozaboy and his environmental treatises, he began to call attention to the plight of the Ogoni people. In 1990, Saro-Wiwa co-founded the Movement for the Survival of the Ogoni People, MOSOP. The organization's mission was clear: to demand environmental justice, equitable resource allocation, and political autonomy for the Ogoni people. The Ogoni Bill of Rights was their manifesto, a fiery document that declared, "We are Ogoni. We are not invisible." The document detailed the environmental degradation caused by oil extraction, the economic marginalization of the Ogoni people, and their demand for self-determination. With MOSOP, Saro-Wiwa found his purpose. He traveled across Nigeria and beyond, rallying support for the Ogoni cause and exposing Shell's complicity in the destruction of his homeland. On January 4, 1993, MOSOP organized a massive protest. 300,000 Ogoni marched peacefully to decry the environmental devastation wrought by Royal Dutch Shell and the Nigerian government. It was the largest demonstration against an oil company in history. The protest drew international attention, but it also drew the ire of those in power. The Nigerian military viewed the Ogoni's defiance as a threat to national stability. As the Ogoni celebrated their newfound unity, the forces of repression began to close in. The government's response to the Ogoni protests was swift and brutal. Military raids became a daily occurrence in Ogoniland. Soldiers torched villages, killed protesters, and arrested activists. Over 1,000 people were killed, homes were razed, and entire communities were displaced. But the Ogoni spirit remained unbroken. Saro-Wiwa's voice grew louder, his words reaching audiences far beyond Nigeria. He became a global symbol of resistance, a beacon of hope for oppressed communities worldwide. Saro-Wiwa's activism made him a target. In 1993, he was arrested multiple times, branded a traitor and a threat to national security. Amnesty International declared him a prisoner of conscience. Undeterred, Saro-Wiwa continued to rally his people, his words echoing through Ogoniland like battle hymns. But the walls were closing in. On May 21, 1994, 4 conservative Ogoni leaders were murdered under suspicious circumstances. Saro-Wiwa was accused of inciting the violence, a charge he vehemently denied. It was the perfect pretext for the government to silence him. The trial of Ken Saro-Wiwa and the Ogoni 9 was a farce. Witnesses were bribed, evidence was fabricated, and the tribunal operated under the shadow of General Sani Abacha's military dictatorship. International observers called it a travesty of justice. As the trial dragged on, Saro-Wiwa's defiance grew. "Shell is on trial," he declared. "Their crimes against the Ogoni people will not go unpunished." On November 10, 1995, the unthinkable happened. Saro-Wiwa and his 8 comrades were hanged in Port Harcourt prison. The executions sent shockwaves around the world. Nigeria was suspended from the Commonwealth, and international leaders condemned the brutality. But Saro-Wiwa's last words, "Lord, take my soul, but the struggle continues," ignited a global movement. The Ogoni 9 became martyrs, their deaths a rallying cry for justice. Today, the Ogoni struggle endures. While some environmental cleanup efforts have begun, the scars on Ogoniland remain. Saro-Wiwa's children, like Ken Wiwa Jr., have taken up his mantle, fighting for their father's exoneration and the rights of the Ogoni people. Ken Saro-Wiwa's story is one of courage and sacrifice, a reminder that the fight for justice is never in vain. The oil may still flow, but so too does the spirit of resistance, stronger than ever. The roots of the conflict in Ogoniland ran deep, entrenched in a history of exploitation and neglect. As multinational corporations profited from the region's oil wealth, the Ogoni people bore the brunt of the environmental destruction. Rivers once teeming with fish now carried the stench of spilled oil. Farmlands, once abundant, lay barren under layers of toxic residue. This devastation was not merely environmental, it was existential. The Ogoni's way of life, culture, and dignity were being erased. Saro-Wiwa saw this as more than an ecological crisis. It was a fight for survival. The Ogoni were being systematically disenfranchised, their cries for help drowned out by the roar of oil rigs. The Nigerian government, heavily reliant on oil revenue, turned a blind eye to the plight of the Ogoni people. Instead, it partnered with corporations like Shell, prioritizing profits over people. This unholy alliance would soon ignite one of the most significant resistance movements in modern African history. As MOSOP gained traction, international organizations and media outlets began to take notice. Environmental groups such as Greenpeace joined hands with human rights organizations to amplify the Ogoni struggle on the global stage. Saro-Wiwa, with his eloquence and fiery speeches, became the face of the movement. He addressed international forums, including the United Nations, calling for action against the exploitation of Ogoniland. "The Ogoni are not asking for charity," he said. "We are asking for justice." His words resonated far and wide, bringing global attention to the atrocities being committed in the Niger Delta. The Ogoni cause became a rallying point for activists and organizations worldwide. From Amnesty International to Greenpeace, voices of solidarity echoed from distant continents. Reports of Shell's environmental and human rights abuses made headlines, sparking protests outside corporate offices and Nigerian embassies. Ken Saro-Wiwa, with his characteristic eloquence, toured Europe and the United States. He appealed to humanity's conscience, calling for divestment from Shell and sanctions against the Nigerian regime. "If we allow this to happen to the Ogoni," he warned, "the floodgates of corporate impunity will open wider." MOSOP's demands were simple, yet revolutionary. Clean up the oil spills, compensate the victims, and respect the Ogoni's rights. But as global support grew, so did the Nigerian government's paranoia. Shell, caught in the crossfire of international scrutiny, scrambled to defend itself. The corporation denied responsibility for the devastation in Ogoniland, attributing it to sabotage and the complexities of operating in a volatile region. In public, Shell promised to engage with the Ogoni people and address environmental concerns. In private, however, leaked documents revealed a different story. Meetings with Nigerian officials discussed strategies to neutralize MOSOP, including increased military presence. This dual approach, placating international critics while colluding with local powers, only fueled the anger of the Ogoni and their allies. The stage was set for a showdown. Not all Ogoni leaders agreed with Saro-Wiwa's confrontational tactics. A faction within MOSOP advocated for negotiations with Shell and the government, believing diplomacy could yield better results. Tensions simmered, threatening to fracture the movement. Saro-Wiwa's unwavering stance, however, held MOSOP together. "Negotiation without justice is submission," he argued. Yet this internal divide gave the government an opportunity to exploit the cracks, setting the stage for tragedy. May 21, 1994, marked a turning point. 4 conservative Ogoni leaders, critical of Saro-Wiwa, were murdered in Gokana. The killings shocked the community and provided the government with a pretext to clamp down on MOSOP. Saro-Wiwa was immediately implicated, despite being nowhere near the scene. Witnesses later admitted to being bribed and coerced into testifying against him. But the damage was done. The arrests began. Saro-Wiwa was arrested along with 8 other MOSOP leaders, later known as the Ogoni 9. Held in squalid conditions, they were denied access to their families, lawyers, and medical care. Saro-Wiwa's health deteriorated, but his resolve did not. In letters smuggled from prison, he wrote of psychological torture and the government's determination to crush the Ogoni spirit. "They may kill us," he wrote, "but they cannot kill our cause." The trial of the Ogoni 9 was a travesty of justice. Convened by a special military tribunal, the proceedings were marred by corruption and intimidation. Defense lawyers resigned in protest, citing bias and irregularities. International observers, including Human Rights Watch, condemned the trial as a sham. Witnesses later recanted their statements, admitting they had been bribed to implicate Saro-Wiwa. Yet the tribunal pressed on, determined to deliver a guilty verdict. Throughout the trial, Saro-Wiwa remained defiant. He used the courtroom as a platform to expose Shell and the Nigerian government's crimes. "This is not about me," he declared. "This is about the Ogoni people's right to live with dignity." His closing statement was a searing indictment of corporate greed and state violence. "Shell is here on trial," he proclaimed. "Their crimes will not go unpunished." On October 31, 1995, the tribunal pronounced its verdict. All 9 defendants were sentenced to death by hanging. The international community erupted in outrage. Appeals for clemency poured in from world leaders, including Nelson Mandela and Bill Clinton. The Nigerian regime, however, was unmoved. General Sani Abacha, emboldened by his control over the judiciary, dismissed the outcry as meddling in Nigeria's internal affairs. November 10, 1995, remains etched in history as a day of infamy. Saro-Wiwa and the other Ogoni leaders were hanged at Port Harcourt prison. Reports emerged of botched executions, with Saro-Wiwa's hanging requiring multiple attempts. His final words, "Lord, take my soul, but the struggle continues," became a rallying cry for human rights activists worldwide. The bodies were buried in unmarked graves, but their legacy would not be silenced. The executions provoked unprecedented international condemnation. Nigeria was suspended from the Commonwealth, and sanctions were imposed by the European Union and the United States. Protests erupted outside Shell offices worldwide, demanding accountability. The Ogoni 9 became symbols of resistance, their deaths galvanizing movements for corporate responsibility and environmental justice. Shell faced a public relations nightmare. Leaked documents revealed the company's complicity in the Nigerian government's actions. Lawsuits were filed, including a landmark case in the United States under the Alien Tort Statute. In 2009, Shell settled out of court, agreeing to pay $15.5 million to the families of the Ogoni 9. The company maintained its innocence, framing the settlement as a gesture of goodwill. For many, however, it was an admission of guilt. The environmental impact of oil extraction in Ogoniland remains catastrophic. Decades of spills have rendered large swathes of land uninhabitable. A 2011 United Nations report estimated that cleanup efforts could take 30 years and cost billions of dollars. Communities continue to suffer from contaminated water, health issues, and economic displacement. The Ogoni people's fight for environmental justice is far from over. Saro-Wiwa's sacrifice inspired other communities in the Niger Delta to rise against exploitation. Movements like the Ijaw Youth Council and the Kayama Declaration echoed MOSOP's demands for self-determination and environmental protection. However, these struggles have often been marred by violence, with militant groups targeting oil infrastructure. The legacy of non-violence championed by Saro-Wiwa remains a guiding light for those seeking peaceful change. Ken Saro-Wiwa's execution sent shockwaves across Africa and the world. Activists in other nations facing similar struggles drew inspiration from the Ogoni movement. From indigenous groups in Latin America to rural communities in Asia, the Niger Delta's story became a blueprint for grassroots resistance. International organizations like the United Nations began re-evaluating their approach to corporate accountability. Saro-Wiwa's life and death highlighted the urgent need for mechanisms to protect vulnerable communities from exploitative practices. The Saro-Wiwa family, led by his brother Owens and his children, refused to let Ken's legacy fade. Ken Saro-Wiwa became a vocal advocate, speaking at global forums and leading campaigns to hold Shell accountable. His children, particularly Ken Wiwa Jr., used their platforms as journalists and writers to keep the story alive. The family's efforts ensured that the world never forgot the atrocities committed against the Ogoni people, nor the courage of the Ogoni 9. In 2011, the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, released a damning report on the state of Ogoniland. It revealed that Shell's operations had caused extensive environmental damage, with pollution penetrating deep into the soil and water systems. The report estimated that cleanup efforts would require $1 billion in initial funding and decades of work. The UNEP report was a vindication of MOSOP's claims and further fueled calls for justice. Yet, implementation of its recommendations has been painfully slow, leaving many Ogoni communities in limbo. Despite the challenges, the Ogoni people have demonstrated remarkable resilience. Community-led initiatives to rehabilitate farmlands and rivers have emerged, driven by the same spirit that once fueled MOSOP's protests. Cultural festivals celebrating Ogoni heritage have become acts of defiance, affirming their identity in the face of adversity. Saro-Wiwa's writings and speeches are recited at these gatherings, reminding all that their struggle is far from over. Art and literature have played a pivotal role in preserving and amplifying the Ogoni story. Saro-Wiwa's satirical works, like Sozoboy, continue to inspire artists worldwide. Films, plays, and documentaries about his life have brought his message to new audiences. In Ogoniland, murals and sculptures honor the memory of the Ogoni 9. These artistic expressions serve as both a tribute and a call to action, ensuring that their sacrifices are never forgotten. The Ogoni struggle forced multinational corporations to re-evaluate their operations in conflict zones. Shell, in particular, faced immense pressure to reform its practices. The case became a cornerstone in the development of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, adopted in 2011. While these principles marked progress, critics argued that they lack enforceability. The Ogoni case remains a sobering reminder of the gap between corporate promises and actions. The fight for justice moved to the courts, with landmark cases filed against Shell in the United States and the Netherlands. These lawsuits sought compensation for the Ogoni 9's families and accountability for Shell's role in the Niger Delta crisis. As previously mentioned, in 2009, a landmark settlement was reached, with Shell agreeing to pay $15.5 million. Although the company denied any liability, the settlement was widely regarded as a moral victory for the Ogoni people. Ken Saro-Wiwa's sacrifice ignited a global movement for environmental justice, inspiring activists in Ecuador, India, and Canada who saw parallels between their struggles and those of the Ogoni. The slogan, "We are all Ogoni," emerged as a rallying cry against corporate impunity. This shared resistance has fostered networks and alliances, strengthening the voices of marginalized communities worldwide. Efforts to clean up Ogoniland have been fraught with delays and setbacks. The Hydrocarbon Pollution Remediation Project, HYPREP, launched to implement UNEP's recommendations, has faced criticism for its slow progress and lack of transparency. For the Ogoni people, the wait for a restored environment feels endless, yet they remain steadfast, demanding accountability and action. One of the legacies of Saro-Wiwa's activism is the emphasis on education as a tool for empowerment. Scholarships and literacy programs in Ogoniland aim to equip the next generation with the knowledge to continue the fight for justice. Schools named after the Ogoni 9 serve as reminders of their sacrifice, inspiring students to embrace their heritage and advocate for their rights. January 4th, Ogoni Day, has become a global event. It is a day of reflection, protest, and celebration, marked by rallies, cultural performances, and speeches. For the Ogoni, it is a reaffirmation of their identity and their unwavering commitment to the cause. Around the world, supporters of environmental justice join in solidarity, keeping the Ogoni struggle alive in the collective consciousness. Saro-Wiwa's unwavering commitment to non-violence remains a cornerstone of the Ogoni movement. His belief in dialogue and peaceful resistance continues to inspire activists facing seemingly insurmountable odds. In an era of escalating conflicts, the Ogoni struggle stands as a testament to the power of words and collective action over violence. Ken Saro-Wiwa's story does not end with his execution. His legacy lives on in the ongoing fight for justice, the resilience of the Ogoni people, and the global movement he inspired. The Niger Delta remains a battleground, but it is also a symbol of hope and resistance. As the world grapples with climate change and environmental degradation, the lessons of Ogoniland are more relevant than ever. Saro-Wiwa's dream of a just and sustainable future continues to guide those who dare to challenge the powerful. The struggle continues. History's greatest stories are far from over. Stick around, hit the link coming up, and dive into the next epic chapter. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to keep the echoes of the past alive.